joining today on this May the 4th. I know there might be some festivities at your offices or at your homes, so I appreciate it. My name is Edgardo Vega, and I graduated from the computer science department first time with my bachelor's in 2004, and then I stuck around for a little bit and worked at a company near Blacksburg called Moog, where I worked as like a IT applications developer. And then I joined and started my master's part-time and finished with that in 2011, where I then moved up to the Columbia area to work at a small company called Next Century Corporation to do DoD and intelligence community kind of work. And I kind of continued that track from, individual contributor, and then moved into a management role as now I'm the VP of engineering for a company called NCYBER located in Columbia, Maryland. So that's a little bit about my background. And so now I'm going to go around the horn and introduce the rest of our panelists for the evening. So Uma, why don't you introduce yourselves?
Hey everyone, I'm Uma Murthy. I'm a full stack engineer with Amazon. I graduated with a PhD in computer science from Virginia Tech in 2011. My dissertation was in the area of digital libraries and also the intersection of information retrieval and human-computer interaction. My advisor at Virginia Tech was Dr. Fox. After trying a few different jobs, ranging from human factors engineering to being a lecturer, an undergraduate lecturer, I decided to pursue a full stack engineering position at Amazon Search, because the work that I learned about was very similar to the work that I enjoyed doing in graduate school. So yeah, and it seemed interesting. And at that point, I also needed a little structure in my life, a little more structure, so that I could leave work at work and then just come home and do home things. And so I decided to pursue that. It's been 9 years with Amazon, and it's been a great learning journey. I definitely didn't need a PhD to do, this full stack engineering job. And sometimes having that, those PhD skills lead me into unnecessary deep dives and rabbit holes. But I guess it's part of the, it's part of the, it's the flip side. But having a PhD has also allowed me to bring unique skills to the teams I've been part of. So as an engineer, I not just write code and design systems and do testing, but I also do research, experimentation, analysis, even publish papers, and also manage to do some UX research. So it's been a good journey. I've worked through the search stack, started at the front end, sort of middle tier services of the search stack, and then worked on autocomplete, and then moved to machine learning, to the machine learning platform where I did offline evaluation. And now I work on training data, building training data for machine learning models for Amazon Search. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Uma. Pardha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Edgardo. Hello, everyone. I'm Pardha Pyla. I graduated from VT with my first master's in computer engineering in 2002, and with my second master's and PhD in computer science in 2006. Currently, I lead the AMOS UX team at Google Cloud. In this role, I'm responsible for a portfolio of products our customers would use to migrate and modernize their bare metal, containerized or virtualized workloads onto Google technologies. Before Google, I was the head of product and UX at a couple of startups. And before that, I was head of UX for a portfolio of strategic products at Bloomberg. And right after my PhD, I was an adjunct at Virginia Tech, where I taught a few classes. So that's been my journey so far. Back to you, Edgar.
Thank you, brother. And Paul?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Paul Thorne. I live in Annapolis, Maryland. I've been in Annapolis, Maryland for about 40 years, but I graduated back in 1996, excuse me, 1976, back when computer science was still in the College of Arts and Sciences before they separated about 20 years ago. After I graduated with a bachelor's in science in computer science, I worked for a software developer, and I've done systems anywhere from chicken farms over in the Eastern Shore of Maryland to Capitol Hill, the CBO, to embassies, to golf courses, Muirfield, for example. So I'm literally from the age of the dinosaurs. We got 50 years at the Virginia Tech. So I've literally done it all. And after about 7 or 8 years of touring the United States, I've settled down. I got a position as the first IT person in the city government of Annapolis, Maryland. And over the years, we developed a full-fledged department. And I left as the chief information officer or the chief technology officer for the city government of Annapolis about 8 years ago. But I'm still get a call every 6 months. Can you come back and help them out with some difficult problems that they're having? That's my story.
Thanks, Paul. So as I don't see any questions in the Q&A, as a reminder, if you have a question, throw it up there and we'll try to get to it. So let's just start kind of around the horn with a kind of a basic question that kind of Haley kind of proposed, which was, what is one myth about taking a managerial route versus an individual contributor route in computer science focused career from your experience? So I'll let kind of any of the panelists jump in and then we'll kind of go around. So Paul, do you want to take that one? Start with?
The question has been a managerial experience, moving from the technical to the managerial experience, correct?
Yeah, like what's kind of a big myth that you've heard but you know that's not true?
Yeah, I think what's most important if you're to keep your technical skills up to date. For example, back into Virginia Tech right now, we should have everyone as a core curriculum. Part of the core curriculum is coding, for example, in Python or something like that. To join a professional society, keep your skills up and running, and it's really up to you to make sure that you do that. Now, the other thing is about a professional society is there's professional management societies that you might want to consider joining. Another route that you might want to take is looking into getting an MBA. So you might want to have some business background. You want to have the business knowledge. It's very important that you do with in the management arena. Or some cases you might want to go into the law. Intellectual property is a very important area that you might want to get into. Well, all these areas, some key points that you might want to consider are that you got to have your communication skills up and running. You got to be able to work as a conduit or a bridge from the technical, sometimes very technical difficulty type of information systems, and communicate it to people above you, below you, and either laterally either side, department level. So X, Y, and Z coordinates. There are many technical managers who make this the biggest mistake instead of paying attention to the people aspect of the role. They continue to do what they've always done, work for their own project and technical skills. But if you ignore your team and their skills, you're really going to alienate them quickly. But your technical skills still have value. As a manager, as I mentioned, the communication and conduit between the various partners and superiors that you service and report to. We can do structured demand. One of my favorite, one of my least favorite activities is dealing with politicians. Don't lie to them. You can stretch the truth a little bit, but never lie. They're not idiots. They're pretty smart. but you can possibly scare them, but you got to give them alternatives. I'll leave it at that and let the other speakers.
Thanks. Pardha, do you have a myth that you've kind of heard about, like, oh, I have to do X to, a managerial versus not?
Yeah, so perhaps the biggest myth is people sometimes might think that there are no management aspects for an IC role, and there are no technical requirements for a management role. But in my experience, that hasn't been the case. Even an IC has this very substantial sphere of influence where they have to influence people who don't directly report to them, which is in many ways, the highest form of management. And then on the management side, it's not just people management, it's product strategy, it is understanding the trade-offs of different technical solutions. So that's the myth. These two are not non-overlapping sets. There is a lot of overlap. And that overlap is defined by the culture and the context of the kind of organization that you work with.
Thanks, Uma, do you have anything, a myth that you would like to add or talk about?
Yeah. Actually, I have, it's kind of in similar lines of what Pardha said. There are two of them. So, one of them is that as a manager, the myth is that you decide what your team works on, or everything comes top down. Whereas in a good team, it's a very democratic sort of process where, and a good organization where everybody's voice is counted and at least your inputs are, and then kind of overall you figure out, the part of balancing out the requirements with the resources that's done at the senior levels. But actually, from my experience, even as an individual contributor in the team, you have a voice in deciding what your team works on. So it's not just the manager who decides that. And the second thing I wanted to say was, as a manager, you don't have to give up doing the individual contributor things that that people do. So for example, I've seen some of my managers have written code. So you write code, you check in code, and sometimes it's a good thing because then you're kind of keyed into some of those lower level details and you develop empathy for your team. But of course, you shouldn't need to be micro managing. But there is it's just that you don't have to give up writing code if you really like it. There are opportunities for you to do that even as you move to the other side.
Great. Yeah, I'll add, I think one of the biggest myths that I've seen, and I know this still probably exists in some places, but I think this is changing, especially in the last few years, which is the only way that you can get paid more money is to take a leadership position. I'll say that many places, and depending where you are, they have dual or more tracks where a person who is highly technically skilled can make as much money or even more than someone who's on the quote managerial or leadership path. Right, the managerial term is kind of fallen out of favor because it's not really, you're not managing, you're leading, and that brings a different connotation. But in both paths, there's equal kind of levels and rungs that you can kind of move to, and it doesn't matter. You can stay completely technical throughout your entire career if that's what you want to do, and get paid just as much money as someone in leadership. It's all really about you and you as a person. So I see some questions in the chat, so I will start with one of these questions, which is, when should you start thinking about which path to take? I'll at least say for my organization, the path kind of breaks at the senior software engineer level. Sorry, that's something in my eye, which is kind of the intersection of where you've had enough probably experience to kind of get yourself in trouble in either way, right? So you have enough technical expertise, you're leading, you're mentoring already from a technical perspective, and then you're kind of having to either choose to become a staff engineer or to be an engineering manager. And so those are kind of like the two paths, like that's the breaking point for my organization. You probably will start determining if you enjoy that type of work kind of as your kind of mid-level or regular software engineering position, and then start working your way toward one of those paths. So that's it, at least for me. Partha, how does it work at your organization?
Yeah, so it is something similar. There are two ladders in Google for each role. There's a IC ladder and the management ladder. And there are some ICs who do actually manage people as well. So it's not that an IC does not have any direct reports. Sometimes they do. And building on the point you made, Edgardo, I think it's very important for people to really get a sense of which path they enjoy. And one way to get that sense is through mentoring. So when we all started out on our careers, obviously we're not getting onto manager track. We start as an IC. And as you get some experience, perhaps a way to figure out if you like management is to start mentoring people and see if those are the kinds of things that you enjoy and that you're good at. And if that's the case, that's a place where you can decide that I'm going to start pivoting towards one or the other. And to another point, Edgardo, you made previously, these days, the lines between these two tracks is not as rigid as it was years ago. Now it is easier, at least, and at Google it is quite easy for one to move from the IC to the management ladder and back. And I have some people who did that in my team. And so it's not a one-way street. But obviously, that is probably something very organization dependent. So you might want to check with your organization and your policies.
Uma?
Yeah, very similar to what Partha said. At the senior software engineer level, you decide or you start thinking about, okay, does developing people appeal to me? And, like Partha said, for that, you take up mentorship opportunities either through other engineers or through interns and see if you enjoy that. That's where you kind of bifurcate, and you can either continue to be an engineer or manager, or there's even program management, technical program management. And so, and typically what we've see, and like Partha said, it's not a one-way door. So typically how it at Amazon is we would try it out as a tech lead. So you would lead a project or a large component of a product and try it out for some time to see if you like it, if you're being effective, and also mainly if you like it, and then or if you need to build some more skills for it, and then you take it. Or I've seen people switch back to they've tried it and they're like, okay, this is not for me, and they've gone back to being individual contributors. So, yeah.
Paul?
Sure. I'm more on the management side of it. So if your past work experience, if you learned how to communicate with your coworkers or your customers, you learned how to be organized, how to solve problems, how to meet deadlines, how to come up with creative solutions, so how to work on a team, how to supervise a team. You've done any of all of the above, that you're probably good on track to be a manager. One of my management philosophies for my group is to instill critical and analytical thinking. So that if you come up to me with a problem, you should already have one or more solutions with the costs, the benefits, the trade-offs before you come to me for resolution. You should have the problem well defined and researched, because the better the problem is defined, the easier, the quicker it'll be to solve.
Thanks, Paul. So I think this was slightly touched on, but another person asked, has anyone regretted or changed their mind about taking a particular route? Is it hard to go back and choosing a managerial role to an IC role or vice versa? So I'll take this one first. So there are days, even as vice president, that, man, I wish I could just sit on keyboard and, it's a stressful day with meetings or, dealing with kind of those responsibilities inside and out of the organization. And some days I just want to hop back on keyboard. But overall, I really, really enjoy my role is on the leadership track. I get to help build a team, organize teams, work with partners, solve mission, and I really enjoy it. So that's kind of like where I found really good. I also like really clearing the track for my team, as what I call it. Like my job isn't to write code. My job is to make sure that everyone around me can write code as fast as possible and deliver a project as fast as possible, and me understanding where like kind of the train tracks need to be put down quickly, and clear the train tracks as kind of things pop up. So that's kind of what I really like. So there are days, sure, I regret it. But overall, I really enjoy my role. I've done both, and actually I've switched, when I was at my previous company, there was opportunities to do kind of leadership and leadership stuff, and then there weren't. And so I would switch back to individual contributor and then move back through. But going through that experience, I really just found that like I found more joy in having other people succeed around me than me necessarily having to do the work. So that's when I became like, I just dug in on this. So I think Pardha, I don't know if you have anything else to say. You mentioned already like the ability to move back and forth pretty easily. So if you want to mention anything more.
Plus one to everything you said, and one thing I would probably add to that is, if you are not very sure as you're at this crossroads and you're making a decision, and let's say you go with the management track, anyway, as a good manager, you want to keep up to date with your skills on the technical side. So I would encourage that one does that as they go up the management ladder, because that would make it easy for that person to switch to IC. But if they lose track of that, and if they focus more on the business and operation side of things, and a lot of time passes, especially in technology space, things move very quickly, that switch back to IC could be a challenge. But obviously, it depends on context and the team and the technology stack you're working on.
Yeah, I'll definitely, I think Uma was moving her head up and down. So do you have anything to say for that?
No, I agree with Pardha. I mean, if you make the switch back and forth, after a certain period of time, then it's possible you might lose a little bit of, you might need sometimes, you might take a little bit of extra time to catch up, but it's not a big loss. I mean, you can still do the switch. So it's,
yeah. Paul, you have anything to add, or you?
Yeah, I want to talk about what you were just talking about a few minutes ago about leadership. And it's really a big myth. It's a manager is a leader. IT managers work well when everything's system performance, operations, implementation, the budget go well. If they don't, and with IT, a hack and an encryption lockout can bring down any organization. An IT leader needs to step up, mitigate, and resolve the issues quickly, firmly, and decisively. A leader would already have anticipated this type of event and had a plan to address it with probably a CERT or a computer emergency response system. At all levels of our organization, not just the IT part, because right now IT is the heart of the business, prime business driver of just about any organization. So not all IT managers are leaders.
Thank you, Paul. So let's see. Jason writes, with it being common to have managerial days filled with meetings, any advice on how to keep your technical skills relevant without having to sacrifice an unhealthy amount of time away from work? Pardha, I'm gonna let you take this one first, because
Sure.
Then I'll switch to Paul, and then I'll take it last. So there you go.
Yeah. Sure, great question, Jason. So the way I've seen this, seen people do this is, if you think of the life cycle of a product, right? There's a pre-release life cycle and the post-release life cycle. In the pre-release life cycle leading up to implementation, QA, and deployment, there is a lot of activities that happen on visioning, design, the trade-offs, and so on. So attending those reviews and reviewing those documents carefully and figuring out the nuances of the various options that the team is considering is one way which you can keep in alignment and keep your ear to what is happening on the technical side. Anyway, you need that as a manager because you need to be able to make decisions and run the program and hire the right people for whatever strategy you're taking. And post-deployment wise, I've seen this work where keeping an eye out for your report from your support organization and what are the biggest problems that people are facing with the product, what are some critical bugs that are happening, how are the bugs tracking. So that way you can double down and figure out why are those bugs existing and where are the defects coming from. Is there like an architectural choice that was made that was not correct, or something similar? So there are ways for you to get at the technical aspects through osmosis and through reviews and consuming reports and secondary artifacts, then not necessarily actually doing the work yourself, writing code. So that would be my way of thinking about this.
Paul?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm deaf in one ear and I can't hear out the other. I just repeat the question again, please.
If you're a manager, how do you kind of keep up with relevant skills without having to sacrifice unhealthy amount of time at home and trying to keep up your technical skills while your whole day's filled up with meetings?
Okay, how do you want to keep and retrain stuff? Okay. Focus on employee recruiting, encourage the culture of diversity and inclusion, encourage and listen to employee feedback. Doing ongoing training is always essential. Working in the government, what happens is when you have a budget cut, usually it's 5 or 10%. The first thing that gets cut is training. So if your budget for training outside your organization is removed, try to do some training inside. There's always experience from your different sections of the groups to give training. Follow the thought leaders on the social media channels and read white papers and case studies. That should help you with keeping your technical skills up to date, but also recruit and retain employees.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I'll just take it from my kind of like own daily rhythm, which is first thing I do is after I wake up at 6 in the morning and get down with a cup of coffee, I sit down with my cup of coffee and I literally open Hacker News as my first thing every morning, and I read through it and I look for interesting stuff, articles, things. You know, at the VP level, like I'll say that yes, I have a lot of meetings, right? But the trick to keeping meetings off your calendar is to schedule meetings that no one's invited to, and show that you're blocked. I was told that by a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. He said, you know, I have to block an hour or two a day. Otherwise, I have no time to actually do my job and think. So don't hesitate to block some time in your calendar and make it look like you can't be met with. That is your time and the time you need to kind of do things. Along with just kind of reading and understanding kind of the wave tops, because, you know, like the VP level, it's like you can't get on keyboard all the time. But I do occasionally, I'll jump in AWS and try something new. I'll, play with some code at work. I'll check out a project, right, that we have, do a build, see if all the directions are right. And if not, ask the questions, right? Like, there's ways to do it. I work 8 hours a day, most days, sometimes 9. I have 3 children at home. My wife also is a technical director at Booz Allen. Like, we have a very busy life on Scouts. So I can't stay at home and like work on other things. So that's how I keep technically savvy. It's also great. Like, hey, as you're building a team, there's going to be people who are better experts at things than you are. But you know what? A 30-minute conversation with them and asking them questions gives you a lot of information without you having to do the work for it. So even just going around as a leader and just talking to the people on your team gives you a lot of insight and can keep you very technical. So cool. Let's see. I think we answered the how do you keep your technical skills up to date as a manager, and how do you balance it with your current responsibilities. And so I guess the only thing I'll add is you have to really kind of understand when you have that time and that flex in your days and kind of the rhythm of your organization in order so you don't, I guess, kind of, you don't put so much time into one thing versus the other. Like you have to understand what the important parts of your day are. But I know like Fridays are a really calm day around the office. Most people work from home. It's a day where I can actually maybe do some technical stuff. I have a lot less questions, a lot less meetings. And so that's when I spend my time there. So let's see. I think there was, how do you feel if there is do you feel there's a ceiling to your career with a technical track that may or may not exist for a managerial track? I'll let Uma take that one. She has a hand up. She's ready.
No. I raised my hand actually for the previous. I just want to
go for it.
One thing. Another way is in your I'll come to your question, but another way is check in your organization if you have programs. Like at Amazon, we have some bar raiser programs for model training, for experimentation, for interviewing. And so if you become part of these group of bar raisers, then you have to do a certain number of, like you have to bar raise models, machine learning models or experiments that are designed or interviews. And so certain number of them in a month or in a year. And so if you participate in this program and then you have a mechanism, you're enforced to kind of do this, and then that will also help you. You're still doing your job, but it'll keep you up to date to what are people doing. When you're interviewing, you get those technical skills. When you're doing model training, bar raising, or experimentation bar raising, you will get to know what's going on and you'll be up to date. Yeah. Okay. So getting back to your question about is there a ceiling to your career with the technical track? So I know at Amazon, and I think it's true at other organizations as well, you have, you go from an engineer, senior engineer to principal and then senior principal. So the number of levels are not that many in the technical track. And you can be at one level for several years, but still do many different things. It depends what do you mean by the word ceiling? Because there's always there's so many different areas, there's so much to do. And as you're growing senior, like Edgardo said, your scope of influence just increases. So you're not just doing the work for your team, you're going beyond your team to the organization and sometimes to other organizations within the same company. So in terms of the position, yes, there is a ceiling when you reach that principal or senior principal level. But in terms of the work that you're doing, that can vary because you could move across the specific area that you're in into a different area and still keep your work interesting and relevant and still make your contributions important. Having said that, I have seen people at Amazon, they'll zip through this whole technical track and reach this principal engineer, and they're like, okay, what do I do now? And so then they leave and they switch, go to another company, and they'll become principal engineers over there. So yeah, I think it depends on what you want. I mean, in terms of, there's so much to learn and there's so much to contribute. I don't think there's a ceiling to that. But yeah, there is, if you're just talking about a position or role, yeah, there is, you reach that.
Yeah, I'll add that at my organization, our a chief engineer is equal to a vice president of engineering, right? But the engineering, that individual contributor at the chief engineer can make just as much money as I can. We have the same band, I guess, at our company. So there's nothing to stop someone from getting kind of that salary. But like for us, when you start moving past kind of senior software engineer, you know, it's not really about your technical skills per se, it's about your influence across the organization. So you won't be able to move to staff or principal unless you're affecting multiple teams across the organization and providing deep impact. And that might be organization internally, but also like if you're making a contribution to like the field as an expert outside of the organization, that also kind of lets you move through those ranks very quickly. So that's kind of how we work. Anybody else want to bring up how their organization works, or if there's a ceiling? If there's nothing to add, we'll move to the next one. So.
Sure. So just one quick addition. On top of so for most practical considerations, these two ladders are almost parallel. So right after principal, there's a distinguished engineer, and then there is the fellow at Google. And I would encourage everyone to go to this website called levels.fyi, and you can plug in the different organizations, and you can see the two ladders and how they where they terminate. And by the time you become a Google fellow or a distinguished engineer at Amazon or Microsoft or something, you're like, you know, there are not many folks like that in the industry. So for most practical purposes, there is no ceiling per se. But I want to echo what Uma and Edgardo was saying, in that if you think of why we go to a job, right, the three main things: one is the compensation, then there is the intellectual satisfaction, and there's a job progression. The middle one, the intellectual satisfaction, never ends, right? In some organizations, maybe you might hit some so-called ceiling from a career progression perspective, but you never stop making impact. So I wouldn't index too much on the ladders, and I would say I would encourage people and mentor people to think of the impact and what brings them joy. And to Edgardo's point on the compensation side, as your seniority goes up, even if you hit a ceiling, your comp keeps going up. So there is not much difference in most large organizations.
I'll kind of boil it down to economics and management 101. It depends on two things. It depends on your role and your value to the organization. If you continually feel to be frustrated about your pay levels, despite trying all the techniques and ideas for achieving a pay raise, it could be that your boss or your employer has simply reached the limit of the value that they placed on your role, the second part, which is different from the value as an individual. You could have a very high potential value, but if your role does not enable you to perform to your fullest extent, then your reward level will be suppressed. For example, does a professor who sweeps the street deserve a street sweeper's salary or a professor's salary? That's my take.
All right, to kind of mix it on its head a little bit, Hassan asked, how should a team navigate a situation where their team manager is missing leadership qualities? I'll take that. So I often, and then everyone can jump in. So I often, well, let's see. I know not everyone is perfect, right? And I know I'm, by any standard, I mean, I'm not a perfect manager, right? And I'm probably not the perfect, I might be a perfect manager for person A and the worst manager for person B. But learning what person B wants is really important, and changing my style to meet them is really important. So like my one-on-one time with person A is much different than my one-on-one time with person B, and how I talk to them, how I direct them, how I coach them and mentorship them, right? if your team manager is missing something, if you have one-on-ones, that is a great time to say, I need X from you, right? And that hopefully will trigger your leader to kind of change their tact with your team or with you. So that is kind of, I guess, my kind of recommendation to you, as I don't know your specific scenario, but ask the leader for what you need. At some point you have to decide, right? Like as we're seeing kind of people leave companies in droves. Some of it's compensation, but not really. Some of it's like happiness in the work that they're doing, right? They just have not fallen in love. But a large one, and it always been true, people leave a company because of a manager or a leader. They don't leave because of anything else, right? So depending on your leader or manager, they just might not be that person for you. And it might just be time to find a new job. So those are my kind of points on that one. Partha or Uma or Paul, do you have anything to add?
Yep. +1 to what you said, Edgardo.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I can say I've had a few managers in the 9 years. Some of them not so great, but most of them were great. Yeah, I mean, adding to what Edgardo said, bring it up with your manager, see if you can resolve that specific situation. And then the other thing is, in an org, typically, if you have skip level meetings, like if you have one-on-ones with your skip manager, that is your manager's manager, not at the same cadence, you'll probably have once a month. So that's another sort of place to bring it up with your skip manager, and see if it's something that can change. The other thing is, getting a mentor within the organization. So if you're not facing sometimes you can't share this with teammates. So having a mentor who's not in close proximity to your team, but somewhere outside, to get a different perspective on the situation and to see if there are things that you can do to drive away from what's going on. And then if all of that does not work, then maybe it's, there's a cultural sort of not the misfit, and then there's not a fit. So you need to change teams or change your organization. You have to be happy. So yeah.
I'll kind of add that, like, as one, obviously we're in a field that is in high demand, right? You literally have infinite choice. If you are unhappy in your place, there is a new place for you somewhere that you can try. Now, I would not recommend being like that person who does it every 3 months, but if you've given it an appropriate shot, just change. I tell my employees, like, if you're unhappy, please let me know so we can figure something out, and then give me a chance to fix it. And after 3 months, if I don't fix it, then I fully bless you and will write your letter of recommendation to head out the door, because I want everyone to be happy. That's kind of the point I'll add to that point of it. Let's see. I'm going to quickly go to work-life balance just because we're getting toward the end, and then I'll try to get to these other ones pretty quickly, especially resources and books. So I'm sure Partha has like 800 books back there. They might all be UX ones. Is one of those yours, Partha? I don't know. Let's see. I knew it was one of his. Okay, so how do you manage work-life balance across these roles? Also, grow up the ladder technically as well as financially. Any tips? Uma, do you want to take that one first?
I'll take the first part. I have no idea about the second one. Financial. Okay. I sort of, but I'm not very financially driven, so maybe I'm not a good person to answer that. But going to the first one, with manage work-life balance as an individual, that's one of the reasons I think why I'm, one attraction for me is being as an individual contributor is it allows me this flexibility to manage my life as well as work. I think just being in it, of course there is the enjoyment of the process of doing the job as well, but a big a big part is flexibility. So I think doing, not being in so many meetings, having, being able to work from anywhere, I really appreciate that. I also have 2 kids at home, and my husband travels a lot for work. So it's a lot of times I'm managing holding fort here alone. And so I need that, I need that flexibility to, sometimes I, take the afternoon off, or I'll take an hour off to run errands or pick up my kids. And so I need that flexibility to be able to work. And then sometimes I'll get a wake up earlier in the morning to finish up stuff, and, or, an hour after kids go to bed. And so, yeah, I mean, that's one thing. And I think I have also seen a good manager, like through progression across teams, a good manager really creates this very inclusive and democratic sort of environment where they appreciate you as a contributor, but also for the human being and all their life around you. And so they're very empathetic. They should be empathetic towards the situation, that you have. And so I think also my team is very supportive. So if I have to drop off a meeting, or if I have to, if I can't attend something, somebody else will take notes. So I think I'm able to achieve this balance because of the work that I do, but also because of the team that I'm part of.
Pardha, do you have yeah, go ahead.
I'm a running coach, so I get a particular schedule. I got people depending upon me to be at a particular place to give them instructions and training and feedback and all that stuff. But I want to touch a little bit about what we were talking about before. It's okay to manage your manager. Like I said earlier, that if you have a particular problem, really define the problem in depth and come up with solution more than one with all the different factors related to it. But my life balance is, like I said, I had a particular schedule and I have to work around that particular schedule with my coaching job. So I got, it's not a volunteer job. So you got other people depending on me, and that's how I balance my life and my work.
Yeah.
I'll add on the second part of that question, on the financial aspect. One thing I would say is awareness, and I've seen some people don't necessarily index too much or focus on those things, but it is always good to know where the market is. And as a manager, you sort of implicitly know that because you're hiring and you're putting out offers. But if you're in the IC track particularly, you may not have data points because you're not looking at people. So websites like levels.fyi, which has a selection bias, obviously, because people volunteer, and the type of people who volunteer might not be representative of the general population. With all those caveats, having said that, it does give you an indication of, based on your experience and your current level, what the market band is across the top tech companies. And then there are some other websites that let you take that number and translate that to a region, because each region has a different correction factor you need to apply. It is always good to know that. And one thing I would also recommend, and I hope I don't get into trouble for this, is it is okay for you to take a call from a recruiter once in a while and just see what's out there. The person who is responsible for your well-being predominantly is you. So it is okay to take a call, figure out what the situation is outside, and you can always go back to your manager and say, looks like this is my market value and I'm not meeting that, and could we have a conversation about that? But knowing that it all comes down to awareness, and there are a lot of resources, not just levels.fyi, for people to look at.
I'll also say, hopefully you've kept in touch with some of your classmates, right? They've all gone off to jobs. Just ask. Just say, hey, like I do that with my buddies. Like I call them up and I say, where are you at? And then, you know, I'll say to one of them, you're not getting paid enough. And the other one, I'll say, you know, I might say like, okay, we're in line, right? So that's just kind of another method of kind of getting a trusted source because they went to the same school. They're probably doing similar jobs. You can just find out from them as well. And so you can kind of gauge the market that way as well. All right, we're gonna kind of running on time, but so we're gonna answer one more question. So we'll go quick. Everyone go quick on this one. And so this is the startup versus big company. In your experience, how much do these two roles differ with an organization at a startup versus a big company? And which one do you like better? No diplomatic answers, please. I'm gonna start this one with Pardha because he has explicit experience in this role. So
thanks, Edgar. And I'll try to give you an honest answer, right? So it's there are pros and cons in both. Startups, one of the advantages I've seen is you get to move very fast. You get to take on a lot of responsibility and scope. You get to wear a bunch of different hats. So all of that is in the positive in the startup column, but you're also very resource constrained, you know, so you're constantly optimizing to do something with severe constraints, whereas you always see, oh, that's the right answer, you know, I want to do that, but I can't do it. Whereas at a large company, you have the resources and you can get to the right answer, but you need to get a whole lot of people aligned with that right answer. And you need to be someone who is comfortable with the time it takes to get everyone aligned and do all of that organizational stuff. So that's the trade-off. And obviously not every large company is one way and not every startup is another way. There are startups that are very well financed and get to do the right thing. The large companies that tend to move very fast. So, but generally speaking, these are the kinds of things that I've observed in my career.
Yeah, I've done stuff in small companies and then a large company and back to a small. I prefer kind of the nimbleness of the small, the kind of just, I don't know, it feels like it has a different kind of energy. I think depends on the big company, you can also get that kind of energy that comes from that. But in general, I found that I just like the kind of smaller, knowing everybody in the office kind of thing, right? And I'll say up to 200 people, I can kind of know everybody. I'm a pretty extroverted person. Not always true in some companies, but that's kind of where I really like and I feel like I excel the most. But I've done bigger and I've been part of a huge, 20,000 person organization, did just fine. But I just